I've seen people burn bridges,
Oh
and you
yeah,
think,
dude.
come on, dude,
Oh man, it
dude.
just. Mm, mm-mm.
You kind of, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go about your
Yeah,
business
but
like that. But you
that's
think,
a
hey,
bold choice to say on Twitter. Oh,
yeah,
good lord. Yeah,
exactly. That's a
wouldn't be
bold
me.
thing to say publicly to the
Hmm.
world. All right, joining me on the next episode, hopping on comms with me right here, is Sean Rogers, aka Spaceman. Sean, you have like a very space man name, Sean Rogers. It feels like it could be like a 60s kind of like a
Mm.
sci-fi like show of some sort, right?
I'm glad it comes off that way. At least, it's I think every kid, to some extent, when you're a kid, you kind of hate your name for a time period. I never grew out of that. I was just like, it's such a weird Irish random name. But my parents are old fashioned, so it kind of clicked when I was an adult. It's like,
That's
oh, I
cool.
get it.
I love
Okay,
it.
yeah.
It's what's the origin of Spaceman? Was this something you kind of you just was it got a gamer tag growing up? You were like that fits, that works for me.
I had a couple of gamer tags that I stuck with when I was a kid, but when I got into more like serious gaming and like sniping clans back in the day when those were a thing, obviously like wanted to pick a name that stuck. Had Nova for a while, and that made the rounds. But when commentary became a real deal, it was right around the time in like freshman year of high school when commentary was for me became a big deal. And at the time, I was also studying the sciences because I'd planned to go to college and do astrophysics, which I did eventually. But it was like, oh, that makes science and then spaceman, and that sounds like a very professional name that's 2 syllables and 8 letters because that matters if you want a cool name in esports. Like, yeah, it has to be like 2 syllables. So it just everything kind of worked, and then been sticking with it since. So
For me, I never really had a gamer tag yeah, I've always just been Adam Savage.
that works. Like, there are a lot of people who just have the name that works, and like if you have that, it's great. Sean Rogers is not a name that, like, for me, I was like, that doesn't sound like you like Chris Puckett is Puckett. That's great. It's Puckett. It's like it's universal. I don't got that. So
People confuse me with the guy from MythBusters all the time, so that's fine. It's they have
you
the
use
same
that.
name,
That's a good thing. You use that.
but people often think it's a stage name. They're like, "Is Savage a stage name?" No, it's my real name.
You just have a really
It's
clean
clean.
name that can be used as
It's
a
clean.
stage
Thank you,
name.
mate. I appreciate
So
that. You can
yeah,
come back,
I
Sean.
got you.
You can come back. Your beginnings, where you kind of like you mentioned obviously kind of kind of astrophysics and this kind of backstory, but where did gaming, was there like a moment that it first kind of came into your life? You're like, that was the kind of like the eureka moment that, okay, I kind of dig games, this is my thing, and I am definitely going to see where this goes.
Gaming was always big. Like I had a Game Boy when I was a kid. My dad had an NES that he had in the '80s, so like I played that with him when I was growing up. And so gaming was outside of like sports. Gaming was like my other hobby. It was that in sports. So always was gaming. I didn't have access to anything big for a long time until like middle school. In middle school, I eventually got a PS2 a couple of years after it was out. And that was like just because I mean my parents were old fashioned. It was at the time where like obviously there was no smartphones then. There was no You couldn't have a phone till you were in high school, and the phones were like flip phones. You couldn't There was no social media. So like my parents were like, you're not doing anything gaming wise because that like rots your brain until you're older. So like when I got older, I realized that like PlayStation 2s were a thing and they existed. So like I was grinding Star Wars Battlefront, Lego Star Wars, all that great stuff, like all the PlayStation 2 classics. I was like, dude, this is great. And I had no idea that online gaming was a thing until I started seeing MLG casually on other people's TV because I didn't have cable. So I was like, oh, like that's a thing. I would go to my friend's house and like there was the MLG Dr. Pepper showdown on like Sundays. That was like, oh my god, it's like Halo. Like, what is StarCraft and Halo? What is this? I don't remember the time period much before that other than just casual gaming. I do remember when Halo 3 came out because I played, and at the time I was playing Call of Duty just casually on the PlayStation, single player, because you that's all you had to just grind single player. But I remember when Halo 3 came out because I remember what Halo was. I had no idea what it was about, but I was like, Halo is a thing. I'm a kid. I'm dumb. I'm stupid. I'm like, okay, Halo's a thing that exists and it's a big deal. And I remember the marketing campaign for it and like seeing Master Chief like for the real first time. And I was like, wow, this looks really sick. And then Halo 3 coming out just as a kid, I was like, this is a big deal in my periphery that this exists in gaming. And then eventually I went to a friend's house, played Halo 3. And then like a year later in like middle school, I saved up, got an Xbox, and then I played online for the first time. And that was just like, so that's kind of how it was just big time gamer, but casually, a lot of Nintendo DS, a lot of playing Pokemon with friends and battling. And then the real competitive gaming was like, "Oh, MLG's a thing that exists. Halo exists with it. What's that all about?" And then I got a 360 and found out what it was all about, and it was just like from there was everything else opened up, the floodgates open. So that's kind of the early journey of it.
Yeah. Do you know what? The Xbox 360 was just like the one.
Life-changing
Oh my
console
god!
experience, just everything. Yeah.
It I actually posted recently saying like, you know, because for me, I remember getting my Xbox 360, and a buddy of mine was working at a kind of
Mm.
like a Blockbuster store, and it had like kind of like a gaming kind of area, and he was working in this area. He was like, "You got to get one. I could kind of hook you up with some kind of, you know, kind of like a deal of some sort." So he was like, "Gonna pick two games." He goes, "Game at the time was Gears of War." It was like you had to get Gears of War
Yeah.
one. It was like kind of like the
Yeah.
quintessential game for the Xbox. But
Mhm.
he also said to me, "You got to try this game, Mass Effect." And I was like,
Oh, that's a
okay,
good shout.
okay, Mass Effect. I was like, okay, I'll check it because it's sci-fi. It was like an RPG, and dude, it changed my life. Like I was just
Mhm.
so I totally captivated. And it was the 360 was a game changer. But I put this post out saying, you know, are there any games you'd sub out for Mass Effect and Gears of War? And I think everyone was like, Halo 3.
Yeah. It was the one, dude. It just it's and that's a again, I live in that era of we were so blessed in the 360 days, especially as kids growing up who had and this is a whole different conversation that I won't jump into about like the rabbit hole of what I consider to be like closed loop gaming experiences with the differences between old gaming experiences as a game product back in the day versus today and how live service changes things. But the experience of having a closed loop experience with a gaming product in 2007, excuse me, with like Gears of War, Mass Effect, Call of Duty, Halo, Splinter Cell was just like kind of ending its run. You had like all these amazing first party games on 360, and as 12 and 13 year olds, like dude, we were eating so good, like we were just having the greatest time. Yeah, that whole time with like Halo 3 coming out and then ODST, and then we had Reach and we had MW2 and Black Ops and MW3 Black Ops 2, Gears of War 3. Like that was an undefeated time of like experiences. And yeah, I mean that shaped there's not a single person competing in esports today who didn't like have like a Halo experience on the 360.
Yeah.
Just
Honestly, Halo for me was my first ever hosting gig in the esports world. Was like a Halo Europe Championship at like it for the ESL way back in
I remember
I don't know
ESL. Wow. Yeah.
2016 or something. It was a long time ago, and that was kind of like a bit of a baptism of fire because it was suddenly kind of like working I'm going to this room where it's like there's all these people and it's a live event and it was incredible. Like, did you have kind of a similar kind of LAN experience where you kind of went to like a competitive event and suddenly you went, there's people who love this just as much as me?
I think the first moment I had it wasn't at my first event, but the first time I had that kind of surreal feeling, which sounds stupid if you're outside of like esports, but at the time, again, like this was we've been working in the industry long enough to where like there are moments where like you walk in a room and you're like, wow, this actually exists. Like it's not just us being like really passionate about the game. Like there's people's whose jobs it is to like be here and be this passionate and like everybody's working today. Like this is just it's a surreal experience. I think MLG 2018. I was doing the Gears Pro Series, and it was our event in New Orleans, and for Gears 4, and it was really great. It was a really great event, but that was my first time since being a fan of MLG. That was my first time getting to work with them and doing that event. It was just like because I've been doing locals up until then, but like doing that as the first big step and then just kind of being in a room with everybody, people I'd known. I know who these people are. It's no shock that yes, these are like, you know, like Blaze and Benson and Colin and I'm just sitting there like, wow, these are people that I know. I know who they are. But it hits you. It hits you in that moment. You're saying like, holy shit, like this is happening. This is a esports event that everybody is really passionate about. There's an actual production happening. People's jobs are supposed to be here working this event. Like it's all those things come together. And then right next to us on the other side of the venue was that they were doing a Halo event adjacent to us. So like, you know, you walk into the green room and then across the stage is Bravo, Onset, Golden Boy, Lottie. And I'm like, as a kid, I'm like, dude, what is happening? Like, why am I here? Why am I invited here? So it was, yeah, it was a very surreal experience.
For like MLG, how did you? Because I guess people often wonder how you get into these things. Like, what's everyone's got like a different way in which they got their first event. They kind of was it simply a case of like were you kind of like knocking on the doors of certain people? Were you kind of just being at events and trying to like like network and such? Like, what was your kind of entry point to kind of actually get that opportunity in the first place?
The majority of how I came up was like online stuff. really grinding that, and then trying to get lucky enough to do a local in New Jersey, because that was the only esports stuff that was around, and that was 4 hours away. So when it started happening, and I got lucky enough to be picked up for some like COD stuff, I'm going to class, and then I'm driving 4 or 5 hours to go do it, work for free, do the event, come home, and that was just that's what it was. So that driving and doing locals that are out of state is like the only thing that existed in Maryland or existed for somebody from Maryland. Um, but when it came to working with MLG, like that was on the bucket list for a long time, and I wanted to do it because I like as a kid again like if you were just cognizant of esports when you're like 11 or 12 in that era, MLG was like your godsend. Like that was the end all be all. Everybody wanted to go to MLG. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. It was like the greatest creation in esports because it was esports. And I know that's different for obviously like the Western audiences and stuff like that. But like for anybody in the US specifically, it was like MLG was the big leagues. You wanted to be able to work with them. And honestly, I just cold called. Like I between doing locals and then onlines and then recording stuff and posting on Twitter or sending around demo tapes and stuff like that, I would email Ethan, who works at EE. I would email Ethan consistently and be like, "Hey, like, is there anything on Charlie? If you need somebody, let me know. Hey, here's a demo reel of me working like as of late. If you want to do anything, let me know." Like cold calling and then going and working the MES events in Detroit, and then getting reps in with Quentin, who did the observing for CDL. Like just grinding, 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 cold calling through emails, Ethan or Curtis, who used to work at Activision, or even Adam. Like I would email Adam's old email, and I'd be like, hey, like here's my demo every couple months, just constantly, 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 and then eventually. I don't recommend that, by the way. I don't recommend just like spamming emails consistently. It does work. I think people are genuinely afraid to like email people and like ask. But I mean, I was a kid. I didn't care. I was like, I just wanted to work. But eventually, when I got picked up in 2019 for CWL. I remember Adam said like I made a post. I was like, hey, like I'm gonna be working CWL. I'm very excited. Like after this was after MLG New Orleans. I was like, I'm really excited. This is lifelong dream. Blah blah. And I remember Adam tweeting under it. He's like, yeah, I've seen all your emails. Like, keep up the passion. And I was like, yeah, yes, sir, man. Like, I'm sorry for sending you 1,000 emails in 4 years, but I was really eager. So honestly, it was just bashing your head against the wall. Like, if you want it bad enough, you just keep emailing and
Hmm.
trying, and then whatever, you pace yourself. Don't go crazy, but you just kind of keep trying because at some point the wall's going to break. At some point you're going to do enough to where they're going to be like, you know what, if we have somebody who can't make it that weekend or something, we'll give you a shot. But it was just straight up just DMing, emailing, sending demos around, just constant, constant, constant.
My hat off to you as well, because it's because cold calling. I went kind of like through the traditional TV route, and I used to hate it because I was always thinking about what the other person at the end of the email was, what their interpretation was. You can't second guess what someone's going to say or do or think. I think the perseverance is definitely one of these things where I think it is really key, because if you
Yeah.
don't try, it's never going to happen. Not every single day. Don't email daily, but
Yeah, it's you can be
yeah.
persistent to an extent. Like you don't have to go nuts with it. And I think you're absolutely right. Like looking back now, I'm like, did I read? Because I always thought I was very self aware of like, okay, how would they interpret this? And I would try to make sure I worded anything I sent out so that it could be interpreted the right way. I was very anxious about being interpreted correctly, especially when it came to emails that I knew were being sent from
Mhm.
like a passionate place. But looking back, I'm like, did I always recognize if like I was, if like I'm cognizant of how they might receive this? But at the end of the day, it's like if you do that, it's analysis paralysis. You can't do that. You just kind of have to be like, all right, coming from a good place. Don't harass them, don't spam them, but be persistent and try to get your name out there and just keep trying.
I'm gonna tell you a quick story,
Okay.
Sean, about something which, and this is the lengths that I went to try and get noticed. Okay,
Okay.
I was trying to go in the traditional kind of TV route of not this is prior to esports. This is kind of just going through like being a presenter on TV and
Hmm.
things in the UK. And I remember my a friend of mine was like, "Look, you're gonna have to try and stand out from the crowd. Do something different. Try and kind of think outside the box, and just be another person who's emailing." I was like, and this is when emailing was still kind of people were saying, "Don't send us links to things because they could be full of viruses." Okay, so they were like, "We want to have hard copy DVDs, like show reels burnt on DVDs
Mm.
and headshots." Dude, I went to like every management company in London with a goodie bag with like a Christmas gift, and like
You
sprinkles
did
and
it the
all
right
different
way.
things, and left them at different places.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, "Hi, I'm Adam. This is my staff." Trying to make an impact. And the one thing, even to this day, that still gets me is that I got a call one day from one of these agents who I was so excited about. It was a kind of like a big talent agency who repped a lot of big actors and things at the time. And they called me. I thought, this is it. This is the moment. And they went, "We can't accept unsolicited gifts. You're gonna have to come back to the offices and collect your goodie bag and take it away." And I was like,
Bro. Dude,
kill me
that's
now,
worse than just them not saying
dude,
anything, man.
dude. And I walk past that place sometimes with my wife, and I'm just like,
Wow.
those sons of bitches. Like, but at the same time, it's like, but that kind of stuff makes you stronger. I
It
think kind of
does.
knockbacks, kind of like that. It does. It definitely
It
does.
does.
I mean, it's
Ooh.
it's one of these things, isn't it? We will learn in different ways and kind of
Yeah.
evolve in certain ways too. But I mean, speaking of evolution as well, from like those kind of MLG days and such, like you've become hugely synonymous with Rocket League and
Mm.
with RLCS. Um, how did you find Rocket League? Was it something that kind of like you suddenly went, okay, this is piqued my interest as well? Is it kind of you were playing with your buddies at the time? Like how did Rocket League come into
The first season of RLCS happened. I remember it happening, and at the time I was working, an event in New Jersey. I was doing a COD event. There was a local there. And I remember talking about it with people. I was like, "Oh, like this Rocket League game just came out, and they just have like this brand new season." And we were just casually discussing the merits of the esport. It just started, so it's like, how long do we think it's going to go? All this stuff, and then a couple years go by. I didn't even think about it. Played it. I played the game a lot in college, and this was like in 2019. Actually, no, this would be like 2015, 2016 through 2019, 2020. I was playing the game in college because it was like it's a great college game. You can play with your friends. But I remember hearing, I want to say it was 2018 was season seven, but season seven World Championship, which was in New Jersey. I didn't watch the event until Sunday, Championship Sunday. I was working an event. I think it was MES at the time. I was working MES in Detroit, and Golden Boy, who I had worked with him, I believe, just adjacently on some other project. But I'm obviously like a big fan of him, and Alex and I are now friends, which is great. But like at the time, he was doing hosting for RLCS, and he was hosting the stage stuff for season seven World. So I was like, oh, like Alex is hosting. He tweeted about, let me go watch while I'm getting ready for this event. And I remember seeing him in the stadium full of people, and they were having a great time. And I never watched RLCS high level. I'd played Rocket League obviously, but I never watched it. And then watching the grand finals match between Vitality and G2, and then watching the gameplay itself, the way it was played, and then hearing James and Jorby call it. I consider that grand finals and that game one specifically to be like on the Mount Rushmore of esports commentary, in terms of like if we have to show aliens what esports commentary is. Like there are games throughout specific esports that really stand out. Like there's CS games, there's games in League of Legends. Like Rocket League's game, I think, is that game one because of the way it sounds. I think the sound attracted me was how much Rocket League commentary at times can sound like you're in a big sports venue. And it was just the way the pacing was, the cadence of the commentary, the way that they were letting the air breathe and stuff. I was just like shocked. I was shocked the way it sounded from Jorby and James. So that kind of stuck with me. I was like, wow, that just sounds like, just as a casters are very good with their ears. We know what sounds good and what doesn't sound good as commentary. So it was just like, wow, that just sounds good. That's amazing. So from there, right when I was about to graduate college in end of 2019, I reached out to James and I was like, "Hey, like big fan. I want to do some Rocket League stuff, just community level. Whenever I jump into a game, I jump into the community side first because I want to work my way up and get good." And I was like, "I want to do some stuff. Do you have anything? You have anything you recommend?" And he told me to reach out to this wonderful woman named Gillyweed who was running some stuff at Rocket League, but also did a lot of the rival series things that worked in tandem with the Pro League. So I reached out to her. I was like, "Hey, just big fan. If there's anything you recommend community wise, I'd love to get involved." Because I want to. Rocket League seems really fun. I have a sports background. I played baseball for 20 years, so I was like, okay, like this. It's cool. It's a cool cross pollination. I like this. It's sports. It's basically just soccer. It's great. And then she hooked me up with the rival series real quick. Like I was supposed to actually go host something for them, but I couldn't that weekend. And then she came back around and she's like, hey, like next month we actually have rival series starting again. It's going to run in tandem with the RLCS. You'll be working out of Burbank. Are you interested? Because you have all this experience with COD and Gears. And at the time, I had just done some Halo. So they're like, are you interested? I was like, sure. I had never done Rocket League. They never brought in anybody outside. They brought in a couple people outside, like to do hosting and stuff, but nobody who's ever come out from outside of Rocket League to do Rocket League. So it was a very big jump for the community, but also for me as well. Like I was fully aware, I'm like, this is a brand new game with a new cadence. Nothing, there's no, I can go do this game and learn something and bring it here. Like I had a Call of Duty cadence coming into Rocket League, which was very, very weird. But yeah, she gave me the offer, which was just wild. I still don't know to this day why Gilly did that, but she offered the role, and I went to do it, threw myself into it, and it was definitely a huge adjustment at first, and it took about like a year and a half to 2 years to figure out exactly where things were. But yeah, I mean, it was just everything felt wrong about it. You're like, this is such a risk, and then I'm like, that's when you do it though. That's when you jump in and just say, send it, let's go. And yeah, it turned out to be a really good decision because that's it's a great game and a good esport. So
Wasn't it originally called Super Rocket Powered Battle Cars? Is that a thing?
yeah, super acrobatic, rocket powered battle cars.
Which really rolls off the tongue, as we all know. And then they changed it to Rocket League and ruined the
Yeah,
whole thing. So, but I think
yeah,
Rocket-
that's right.
out of
Yeah.
curiosity with Rocket League, because I've obviously dabbled and played a ton. Does the meta change of the game?
I mean the meta has changed based on the players. Like the best way to describe it is the closest equivalent to like melee that I think a non-melee game is. In the sense that melee has what like 8 characters, they all have their move set, and we've seen the evolution of melee to the extent of like frame perfect timings and all this kind of crazy stuff. So now you have like Zane conquering Marth 20 years after everybody thought Marth was done for. Like you have this evolution of meta because of the player. The game has its limitations, but the players manipulate that. Same thing with Rocket League, where like there are different hitboxes in the game, but there are usually just 2 cars, the Fennec and the Octane, that matter. Like people, that's what the pros have decided. This works best for how gameplay works. This works best for how we manipulate the game. And sometimes the dominance comes back in and around, but it was essentially there's two or three cars, usually two, that have different hitboxes, but not by much. And that's it. Everything else has been seal it. Like if you see a flip reset, it's because a player figured out how to do it. If you see originally flip reset actually wasn't in the game, but they added the ability to get your flip back, and then players realize they can throw the ball in the air and then get their wheels on it, and all of a sudden that breaks open offense, and that's a brand new thing. So like, corner pinches, redirects, air dribbling, flip resets, all these things that exist now in high level Rocket League is simply in the game that players have just figured out how to do. A lot of those things were never intended, like um getting like a psycho shot, which is if a ball is going towards your backboard and you go up for it and you angle your car correctly, as the ball comes off the backboard, you can get it to skim off the front bumper. And if you do that, you get a speed boost for some reason. You get a speed boost on the ball and you can send it the other way downfield without it touching the ground. Again, it's like these things that like the devs were like, yeah, let's do that. That makes it just players figured out that that is a thing that exists in the physics of the game. And so yeah, it's Rocket League is a completely physics-based esport, and the players have just learned how to manipulate the physics. So the meta is just whatever player decides they're going to break the game next, and then everybody else adapts, and we all catch up. So it's a very different, unique experience for sure.
As a caster, as a brilliant one as you are as well, when you're kind of looking for the way in which you kind of navigate the best way to kind of bring the action to people, viewers at home, and cast what's happening too, is a lot of it kind of like gameplay focused, or are you kind of focusing more on like kind of the storylines around teams and players as well?
Yeah, that I mean that is a ratio that's been tweaked over the years. When I started, it was very gameplay focused because I just didn't have the backlog of knowledge. Not that the backlog is very dense at the moment, but it's just I didn't have the knowledge there. And as I've gotten more ingrained with it, and as I've obviously worked the game more, there's a mix between a lot of Rocket League is phasing, and a lot of esports. The nitty gritty parts of commentary come down to like, all right, like you know, in the start of the game, how do I want to approach the storyline? In the middle of the game, how do I want to approach the storyline? When do I jump in and out of my position as a color commentator or play by play? When do I do story? When do I inject stats? A lot of this is storyboarding for commentators. So like for Rocket League, at first it was very just strictly the roles that you're defined as do that. Over the years, the storytelling's gotten more ingrained with the gameplay. My approach was as of late has been very, like set this when we begin, set the stage, set the story based on kind of what's happening in the opening minute, minute and a half. then we can start working in some stats if it feels appropriate. And it's essentially just, read what the game gives you, and then we'll adjust the how we approach the game from there. But yeah, the way that we phased Rocket League now, and then me and my duo do it, is just storytell and set things up, set up the pins first minute and a half, and then halfway through the game jump into our actual roles, do the dirty stuff, and then in the last 30 or so seconds start knocking the pins down, start bringing the story back for game one, talk about what the story is at the moment, what it should have been, or what it's going to become, and then look how the series is moving forward. And then between all those phases, you can jump into how you want to manipulate your cadences in like the first phase, and like how you think your cadence can bounce off of your storytelling. Me and my duo have been playing a lot with tenses, which we mean is like, using stats in past tense, using stats in current tense, using sentence structure that can change between, if a play is breaking down, does that mean that then we need to move into talking about the game from where it was a minute ago? If the play looks like it's going to develop, do we then jump into like really specific in real time, like synonyms and things that just like really focusing on the timing of how do you orchestrate a commentary call based on what the game's given you, what you have prepped for it to be, and then it's all about synonyms at the end of the day. I mean, the one thing commentators harp on is like, obviously you want to have synonyms for your vernacular, but having synonyms for vernacular and also having it for how you're seeing the game, how I cannot just see the game as it is now, but how I can, let a minute go by, download it, and then regurgitate what's happened from a different perspective. Doing that consistently in and out, different phases, that has just been, because Rocket League is so in a box, there's not really a lot of outside info. It affords the ability to get super, super creative with how you break down your approach to the game. Like COD's different. That's one thing I told guys when I came in, was like, for COD, it's like, oh, the spawns are over there. I know this team's gonna start rotating. They have an anchor that just died. So like there are things off the map that I can play with and have fun with. In Rocket League, everything's in front of you. And it's like, well, damn, I can't talk about some guy OEing and like what this means, because the next 20 or 30 seconds are entirely dependent on what's happening right now with who's on the ball. So how do you pull yourself in and out of pockets of being present and like working in past tense and in future tense? So yeah, a lot of that weird stuff, that has all just been a result of Rocket League is a very restricting game with what it brings to the table. But the balance between hard commentary, your roles, and then getting creative with the roles themselves, and what those gaps afford you, has been the most rewarding part of the experience. So
And you articulate it so wonderfully as well, because I think a lot of people naturally will watch, they'll watch an event of some sorts online, an esport of some sorts, and there's a flow, there's a kind of like a natural kind of, picking up off each other's sentences, there's kind of like contextualizing things, and you play by plays versus color casting, and the seamlessness, the fluidity of a duo is so it's such an incredible thing to see it happen in when you're in like an arena, and in real time as well. It's one thing seeing it online when you have just the gameplay and you're just hearing voices. To see kind of like yourself, your duo partner, you're seeing others kind of like casting the action live as you're watching it, as everyone else is around you as well. The energy, and there's a lot of pressure as well in those situations, because obviously you've got to make sure that you don't want to you don't want to miss a single high. You want to make sure you kind of give every key moment the justice it deserves, for the players as well as like the broadcast, everything as well. And I think people forget like the amount that goes into it. You said, working on synonyms and working on kind of vernacular and things. There's so much more than just, I want to be a caster. There's so much more to that
I
kind of
mean,
skill
it
set.
is a commentary. I've always viewed it as it's a very, I think for a lot of commentators it's a very personal practice. It is an art form in a lot of ways. It's a very devotional skill set. You have to devote yourself to like getting better. But it becomes an instinctive practice a lot of the times. It feels very like, like there are moments last year where, if I look at our games at Worlds, where it's like Achieves and I, like we're talking about the game in real time, something happens, he breaks it down, I give a quick analysis cut. Then he takes it, somebody scores, he hits the moment as it happens, and I say, hey, instead of recapping whether defense didn't do their job, what if I take the tense back and we go back to what happened in Boston, give a quick anecdote and keep it going, and then move back to current the current moment, and just keep doing, like, there are moments where it's like, okay, all the things that I've planned and all the things that I'm trying to work on really come together, and like if the game's not giving me much, I can manipulate what I get from the game, and I can do what I want to do with this now. And so you see like the rewards there. You see the efforts of like, okay, we phased all of what we did, all of our three phases, and all of the additional micro phases in this game correctly. And then there are games like we had at Boston between like Vitality and Rule One, which is like a 17-minute 0-0 game, where it's like, okay, we phased for about 5 minutes and then we got into overtime and nobody was scoring, but like we had one of the greatest overtime games of all time. So there was about at the 7 minute mark of OT when nobody scored, Isaac and I at the time were like, hey, we're no longer gonna phase this game. We're no longer gonna try to like, rigidly stand. We're just gonna react. So like it's knowing instinctively when to be a commentator and when to just be a fan and react and just go along with the ride is the fun part. That's the part I think we all live for. So yeah, like as much as it is like minutia and as much as it is like jumping into the details, sometimes you're gonna get games where it's like, hey, the universe is telling you you don't need to like commentate here. You just need to like react and just be present and just enjoy it. And that's what we got, which is like the final 5 minutes of just like we're just screaming. We're like, what is happening? So yeah, it is an art form and a skill set, but it doesn't mean that you can't kind of surrender to it at times and just let it exist. And when you surrender to it, it's a current, like you try to paddle upstream as much as possible, but there are times where you need to just turn the engine off and just let it take you where it takes you and then go down and figure out what happens. So
And are you doing this all through like a look at each other or like a hand gesture? Like how are you? Because obviously you're on live mics the entire time. Do you have like your own way of kind of agreeing on a way of like a practice of some sort? How do you kind of tend to do it in your way?
whenever for me specifically, like whenever I work with somebody, if I don't have good reps or if I don't have like immediate chemistry with them or good reps with them, it's always like, what can I do in whatever role to make you feel comfortable? What do you want to do? And I'll do the opposite. And then like if things get really, really casual and even, that's great because then we can do a hybrid. But like with the Chiefs, like he was strictly like color commentary. Sometimes he does play by play, but he was strictly color. I was usually strictly play by play. So like we just knew the roles. Like when I a lot of this is just obviously practice, but when you cast a lot, you especially it helps when you cast with the same person a lot. You know their handoffs, you know when when their inflection's going down, so they're about to end their sentence. You know when it's going up, so maybe they want to keep things going. You just know the person, like you know how people talk. So it's like, okay, I can sometimes pick up on when a Chiefs is going to hand off, or if you know what he just handed something off, and I'm like, you know what, I don't have much to say, so I want to ask you a question, and I'm just gonna throw it back. It's a lot of that stuff of just being close with the person you're working with, just knowing how they operate, and obviously, like a lot of like when you're in person, it's like a lot of hey, keep this going. Hey, keep note of this. I'll do a lot of pointing if somebody's on a really good point, and I can tell they're gonna wind down. They've said their 15 seconds, and they want to close it out. I'm gonna say, hey, no, 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 you're keep going. You're on something important here, or you're in a moment, don't stop for me, please continue. That exists a lot. But there are times where like with Isaac, during our OT, it was just it was a lot of it was a lot of pointing at times of like, hey, this person's over here with the ball, keep an eye on this just happened. But we were both basically locked in of just like when I hear him stop yelling, I'll then come in, and like it just worked in real time. I think casters do share a brain. They're in it together, and that synchronicity is really cool at times. So
So for all the aspiring casters and commentators out there, work on your gesticulation. It's
yeah,
important.
it's
Get those
it's
gestures
very
down.
important. Yeah.
Definitely makes a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, RLCS was you've been a huge part of the genetic makeup of that for a chunk of time.
Mm,
Earlier on this year, I saw you kind of tweet out saying that kind of it wasn't you weren't coming back for the next season or the next
hmm
series.
hmm
Um, can you tell us about because we both work in this freelance world, but we're both kind of like we're hand to mouth all the time in terms of you work opportunities that come our way and kind of generating opportunities. But when you have a game like Rocket League, where you're a big part of that community, you're a big part of that game, and that's a big chunk of of what you do, and the kind of and the kind of the realm you kind of tend to work in. When that doesn't get renewed, is that how does that affect you? How does that kind of like on a personal level here? How does that kind of like play into your year? What kind of changes for you, and how did that kind of sit with you when that kind of news hits? Like, how does it affect you?
it's if you're freelance for a long time, and I think most freelancers know this, like nothing's ever guaranteed. So even when things are going well, you don't expect it to last long just because of the way that's the trade. So I mean, I've been freelance the entire time I've done esports. not like by choice. I would very much like it to not be the case, but
Be
it
nice.
is, it would be nice. It'd be nice just to have that security. But freelance is obviously a thing that a lot of people who do freelance do it if they have the opportunity because they have to or because they like the flexibility with it. I do like the flexibility that comes with it, but you have to obviously like love the job enough to put yourself through some things in esports, and that, yeah, it's one of the aspects. But yeah, it was tough. It is. I think the biggest. I didn't like. I wasn't shocked by it. We knew changes were coming about halfway through. Not even halfway through. About 2 months into last season, we became aware that changes were going to happen, and so we all kind of knew that the last season was going to be like the last season that kind of everybody was all under one umbrella. So we said, all right, like we can either be sad or we can just go out there and just go absolutely insane and have a fun time. So we went insane and had fun time, and everybody started doing what they wanted, like in the professional way. We were like, all right, let's try this. Let's try this. Let's do this. And it was fun for me because obviously like I always feel pressure uh even if I'm told, "Hey, you did a good job this event. We want you back for next event." That doesn't make me feel good. And it's like, "Oh, okay." Like, I just as a freelancer, I'm always nervous and anxious. So I was like, "Okay, like, just got to do better next time." So went crazy, had fun, it was great. But I expected it to happen. Not that I wanted it to, or there are days where I'm like, it's just as a talent, you're like, I don't think it should have happened to me, but if you're in this business long enough, you have to expect certain things, just know how to read the writing. So you read it and you're like, all right, cool. I didn't have much time to like process it. I processed it, if that's a sentence. A couple of weeks later, I actually handled it surprisingly well. And was chilling and just started looking for jobs again. And I had a week or two where I felt kind of down and stuff like that. But like for a lot of it, it's just I try not to think about it too much because I'm very grateful, obviously, for the time that I had with RLCS and any time that potentially happens in the future. Obviously, super great. But I like what I did. I like what I accomplished with it. But unfortunately, again, like the benefit and detractor of being a freelance is like you don't have a lot of time to like sit and be upset about it. It's like, okay, that's gone. So, big pay cut for the year's gone. And then around that time, a lot of the work with CDL stuff and challengers was like winding down. Especially for 2024 was like kind of getting like slashed. So it's like, oh, like double whammy. Here we go. Just kind of in the blender here. So yeah, I mean, it definitely it sucks, but yeah, it's just there hasn't been much time for me to think about it. It's just been all right, like, you know, very much focused on the grateful part of it, which is something that I was always kind of worried about. I was like, if the day comes, like, how will I handle it? Even though I think I'll handle it pretty well. And I'm very glad to report that that the overwhelming majority of the feelings when that day happened was like, oh, like I'm like weirdly grateful about a weird sense of relief, not relief, but like I remember sitting there at night just when everything was hitting, and I was like, oh wow, this is real. And it was just a sense of like gratefulness and just like looking at the memories of what happened over the last year, and just like, wow, this is awesome. So yeah, just focused on keeping your feet under you and finding the next thing because esports doesn't stop. So just got to keep it moving, man.
Been through very similar things myself. I think that the thing that I find most difficult is the lack of feedback. If I'm kind of saying,
Yeah, that
okay,
was the big one. That hurt. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
it's like why have you selected this person? Because everyone knows each other. Everyone knows exactly who the
Yeah,
people are
that
coming
that was
through.
tough. Yeah.
Everyone knows exactly who kind of is getting the roles, and you kind of go, okay. And you sometimes you're in a position where you think, okay, I offer what I offer, and that person they have different energy, a different way about them. That's fine. And you're right. You have to be very you have to be very kind of humbled that you had the opportunity, and
Mm.
then you hope for the next one. But then you kind of look at it and go, and you do start to analyze it and unwrap it, don't you? And start to go, so
Yeah.
why aren't I coming back? And if you try and ask for feedback, a lot of the time you don't get that feedback. And I think that's the
Mm.
hardest part. Is it's like if there was a thing that I can work on, that I can go, okay, that's the thing, that's the reason. And if I did that better next time, I'll come back and do it again. And then you don't get that feedback. It's very hard to kind of like just kind of swallow and go, right. So this came down to just a personal preference. Did it? And it's bitter. It's a tricky pill to swallow.
I mean, the feedback I usually get is like if it's obviously like TOs will give you feedback. They're like, hey, you did great. Think like all that's great. But like I've had a couple of talent managers in the past. I've never gotten like, you know, crazy feedback or anything like that post events or even like when, when gigs end, it's like, okay. So I've always just kind of operated like I look at my peers and I say, how are things going? And I ask them for legitimate input. And then I make friends with production a lot. Because one, it's just like a lot of the people in production are just really good people. So it's like you talk to them, hear about their experiences and their esports journeys, but also like they're the people who deal with us all the time. So they'll tell you like straight up if you're doing a bad job or something. So like the first thing I did was reach out to some of the talent, obviously, that I worked with, and reach out to some of the production people because they are the people's opinions that really matter. And was like, all right, like, just tell me like flat out, like, is there something I did or like, because I don't think I'm pretty. I pride myself on being usually pretty self aware about like where I'm at and like what I'm saying and stuff. So it's like, okay, like, are things good? The good takeaway was like, no, it's like everything's good, like you're fine. So that was big. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those situations where though you don't get maybe like the feedback that obviously and having feedback doesn't help either. It's like, you were good, but we didn't hire you, or, we really like what you brought to the table, but like there wasn't a spot. That doesn't make you feel good. It's just like, all right, cool. Like now I know that I'm doing my job correctly. But yeah, it's the biggest advice I have for anybody going through this kind of thing, and it's something I try to keep myself grounded with is do as much as you can to make yourself as invaluable as possible. And if it still doesn't go your way, there's nothing else that you can be upset about. Count your losses, fight for the respect of your peers and keep it moving. So, like last season, we all knew was basically over. Do everything. I did everything I physically could to kind of up the game, content wise, commentary wise, all that stuff. Was happy with, was unhappy with some of the performances at times, but was happy with kind of the collective. Like, all right, this worked. And then yeah, at the end of the day, like I just wanted respect from my peers. So if the people I'm working with or the people who are watching, that I value their opinion, and they were like, yeah, you did a good job, that to me, I'm like, all right, cool. Like that's what I cast for is for that respect. So, um, the non-contract renewal, I'm like, okay, it sucks, but I'd rather know that I'm good at my job and then deal with everything else after that than
Mhm.
have that happen and be like, self-questioning, like, am I actually good at this? Like, what is this just all fake? So, yeah, just focusing on like keeping what's in front of you. Like, no, you can do the job.
Mhm.
You know what you're doing. Always open to feedback, stuff like that. But just keep yourself grounded is really important when these kind of things happen. So
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think you have to do that. I think it's and a lot of the time it doesn't come down. Yes, it's nice to get a paycheck for working in games because hey, this is an amazing thing that I don't ever take for granted. But sometimes it comes down to kind of just wanting to still be in amongst it, kind of with that game and to still be doing what you love, kind of in a game that you are so passionate about and know full well that you do this amazing job. But it's like you sometimes just have to kind of go, okay, this is just the way it is right now. My chips are down, but tomorrow it could be completely different. And it's that I think it's that optimism that's kind of like the part that the glass is always half full. That I think you have to have that thick skin in gaming and esports in general because things change so quickly. And it can literally be tomorrow. You could wake up and then someone says, "Oh, this massive production company's been acquired by this other production company who you've never really worked with before," and suddenly it completely changes the dynamic. And you think, "Okay, no one knows me there. I'm having to kind of walk in there and start again." So it's one of these things, isn't it?
you got to always leave with a good impression. Leave doing the right thing. I'm like a very big proponent of. I think you can make it to the top in the business without being an ass, and I think you can do it without stepping on people. And like, there are examples obviously where that doesn't always work, and there are examples of people who have a very different approach. But like for the most part, it's do your job, don't be late, help others, when do what you're supposed to do, be good about it, and just don't be hard to work with and stuff like that. So you never know what's going to happen. I always used to think as a kid, it was like when you would read stories or hear about, people in their career, they hit a speed bump and you're like, man, what I can't imagine what that's like. As a kid, you're like, wow, I feel like I'd be so, I feel like that's such a big event. That's like so massive, and that like, how does that not derail a person because you're working so hard for something and something goes wrong? But then when it happens to you, it's like, okay, like obviously we don't sit here and we're like, yeah, like everything's great. Obviously, not everything's not always great, especially when you're in situations like this. But how you react to it is always in your control, even when it's like you're 99% angry and 1% like, yeah, but you kind of have to just suck it up and deal with it. It's like, all right, that 1% speaks for the rest of you at that point. So it's like you got to suck it up and deal with it. And so being able to being able to like continuously rely on yourself to like push through it and be like, you know what, like that is the way the cookie crumbles, and just keep it moving. You never know what's going to happen in a month. Things could be very different, and as long as you keep, you don't. I do not like burning bridges ever. I think that's a very bad practice. And so it's always leave on good graces and always be ready to work whenever somebody calls. You never know what what that could lead to in a month. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people burn bridges,
Oh
and you
yeah,
think,
dude.
"Come on, dude,
Oh man, it
dude."
just. Mm,
You kind of,
mm-mm.
you kind you kind of, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go about your
Yeah,
business
but
that way.
that's
But
a
hey,
bold choice to say on Twitter. Oh,
yeah,
good lord. Yeah,
exactly. That's a
wouldn't be
bold
me.
thing to say publicly to the
Mm-hmm.
world. But
Mm-hmm.
wasn't it Rocky that said like it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up again? I think that's kind of like
Yeah,
the
it's not how hard
mantra.
you get hit, it's how hard you get hit and get back up. I'm like, that's
Exactly.
great
That's
for a
it.
lot. Like, to his credit, that's great for a lot of things. It doesn't. You don't want to hear that when you're being knocked down. I don't want to hear like get back up. I'm like, yes, dude, I'm aware I need to get back up, but I want
Yeah,
to be here for a little bit. But it's true. It's like, dude, at the
it
end of the
is.
day, you're there are only like 3 or 4 people who legitimately in esports or any entertainment will get to do their dream job and do it for the rest of time, and that's just what they do. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, we all want to be that person, but we can't be because they have to be those people. So it's like, you know
And
what?
we know those people.
Just
You can count them on your hand, and they
exactly.
will
You know exactly who they
always.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, always, and rightfully so. So your journey doesn't have to be defined by what they do. It just has to be defined by how you react to what's happening to you. And like I love stand-up hosts and stuff like that. I watch them continuously, but like I think of when things were going down, not that I'm at all comparable, but I was thinking about like, Conan O'Brien was slated to do, I believe, like the Tonight Show and to pick it up. And then obviously the contract shenanigans
Hmm.
went down with Jay Leno. And it's like he didn't get the dream job that he was ready to take and accept. And everything was all on his side. And some nonsense got in the way. He doesn't get it. And he has to completely change paths in his career and go on to do something else. And then that proves to be like the best thing he ever did. But it's like, dude, the most successful people, at sometimes they just get things that don't go their way. And it's like they have to pivot. And they're like, imagine what he's thinking. I'm like, dude, if things don't go your way in esports, all right, you never know what the next road's gonna do. You just, everybody from all levels goes through this. So you just gotta deal with it. Yeah.
You have, honestly, it's and I think I know it's kind of maybe cliche to say, or cheesy to a degree, but when these things do happen, it genuinely does kind of make you better when moving forward. It kind of gives you, it makes you tougher. It makes you kind of kind of more kind of.
It
Exactly,
does.
and how you
Yeah.
adapt and push on from there, really, I think
It forces you
and
to
it's
change.
testament to anyone who, we all go through the ringer. I think anyone out there is what aspiring, kind of trying to get into kind of esports and gaming in some capacity. Like, it is an amazing thing. Like the opportunities, the kind of like the being in the world and in the green rooms with the other talent, working with production teams and these huge events, or studio based ones. It's and I feel like nothing else, but it's short-lived, and you can't rely on it being week in week out, because it is one of these things that just it's an ever-changing machine that's always kind of like turning, and different cogs, and it's complicated. But we're very lucky that we kind of we've done these great things to date, and long may they continue, Sean.
I think we'll be all
I'm
right.
positive they will.
I got good feelings about us. Yeah, we'll be okay.
Oh, we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine. We'll figure out a way. We just got to work on our hand gestures, then we'll be fine. You and I will kind of, we'll work it out. I mean, one thing you did do as well, I think has been brilliant, is I've seen this kind of like this kind of this side of you as well, making this incredibly well produced content. I mean, I think everyone and their mother's mother and grandmother has seen the Andor video that you kind of made around kind of like in Star Wars and things, and kind of your channel. And I loved watching kind of you would regularly post about your kind of YouTube channel, which is kind of separated away from gaming. I guess it's getting more pop culture, kind of like kind of movie kind of TV based. Um, and what I loved seeing is that kind of like the growth you're experiencing very quickly, because of making great content. I think that's really important. It's not necessarily about a lot of things trend. What's trending? Oh, let's make things about that. You're making things which were really well written, well produced, and well articulated, which I guess comes back to kind of work as a caster as well. Like, you managed to kind of convey your kind of review things such as Andor. I mean, with your YouTube channel, let's talk about that kind of with that kind of particular video and other things that you've done. Um, making that, did you know you were onto something special there? How did you kind of go about doing that? How did you determine that, that's something I want to talk about and make a video about? I think it's important.
With the Andor one specifically, yeah, I mean, that video is a little weird. It is. I'm glad that video has done what it's done, and I'm glad that it's kind of it is the video I am most proud of. Content very much feels like at times it is my creative outlet. It is where like if I'm thinking about things all day every day, I can be very very wordy in content. So it is something that I actively work on with my videos is like simplifying the things that I'm saying because I love to just talk in videos. But yeah, that video, it kind of came together as a perfect storm. And you know, I was threatened by it when it came out because I was like, I don't feel like I can make something like this again because I was very cognizant of what I did. When the show ended, I obviously wanted to do a video on it, and it was actually pretty easy to write, surprisingly, because I think the more moved you are by something, the easier it is to convey exactly what you're feeling. And obviously, there are depths to there are depths to the human experience that can only be reached with like music or visuals, and you have to know kind of how to combine them. But when it comes to like the wordplay stuff, yeah, the review came together pretty easily, which I'm grateful for. Yeah, it was fun to put together. The music was I don't make any money off that video. I don't make money off of a lot of my videos because the music is pretty copyrighted. So
Bloody music. God
yeah,
damn
that bloody music. Yeah.
it.
But yeah, I mean, it was fun to put together. I was really sick at the time when I finished writing it, and I was trying to get it out before Esports Awards. But I couldn't. So I came back. I came back. I did a show with CDL. I was dying. I was so sick, but got it recorded, had a song originally that was supposed to go with it, and then found I had that song stuck in my head, Remembrance, which I think is one of the best guitar songs of all time. It is brutal. But I had it stuck in my head, found it, plugged it back in. It lined up with every cut I did in the video. I was like, well, that's the universe telling me I need to use this song. So put it out. And yeah, I mean, the response was really great. It was really overwhelming at first. It still is. It doesn't feel still like it's I see it on my channel and I'm like, wow, I did that, but it doesn't hit me with like that's mine. That's like a thing I did. I'm very focused on the next thing and stuff like that. But the content's been fun. It is just it's an outlet that I wanted to keep separate from esports. I'm very big on I don't know why, but I'm big on keeping parts of myself separate from other parts of myself. So like, you know, I live and breathe esports. I don't want it to be what my content is always about. I'll do esports content, but I want to do something that is personal and things that I care about, and just have those different avenues so that if esports dies tomorrow, if esports industry goes under, my channel's not going to suffer. So that was kind of a big thing, was just a creative outlet that I can think about extensively without it being exhausting. But I'm a big nerd, man. Like I grew up reading comics. I grew up in the era of Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. So like when the MCU was going from like 2008, I saw Iron Man in theaters. When MCU was going, that the era of the MCU right around Civil War was when I was in college. So Civil War to Endgame, like that was all me and my friends would talk about is like theorizing what's going to happen with Infinity War, what's going to happen with Endgame. And at the time, I didn't really have the ability to make videos. So when I got out of college, I was like, I spent days theorizing with friends about what's going to happen with Tony, what's going to happen with Thanos, all this stuff. I'm like, I just need to put all that energy into like talking about this stuff professionally finally.
Mhm.
So it was really easy for me to do because I was like, I already think about I read thousands of books. I watch, consume so much content. I'm like, I'm already doing all this stuff anyway. Might as well just try to do it myself. So yeah, it's been fun to do. I like the devoted practice of it. I like kind of throwing yourself into something and then really like spending days listening to kind of music and editing practices and making things feel like really cinematic in some aspects. That's been the fun part. Obviously kind of growing with it has just been really just throwing yourself into a piece of content. And then when you're done, you feel exhausted. Like I like that feeling of like, wow, you know, I just unloaded into something and
Yeah.
then give it a couple days, come back and do something else. But that's the fun part for sure.
You made to me as well. It's evergreen in the sense that it will exist, and you've made something you can kind of years down the line go, I did this thing. This is how I felt about it at the time, and here we are. I
Yeah.
mean, speaking to a fellow nerd here, I mean, I've got Indiana Jones Temple Run Lego behind me, dude. Like I'm
Oh,
living the
dude, I was
dream.
looking at that the other day. I'm not gonna lie to you.
So
Ooh.
I am so into Lego has become my thing. I've kind of refound Lego again.
I've done that too. Yeah.
Yeah, you have? Oh,
I know exactly, especially during COVID time where it was like it was very much when you're dude, building like a Lego set when you're an adult and like especially if it's something you like if it's indie based, if it's Star Wars based. I have a DeLorean I haven't built. Like building something and just putting it together, turning your brain off and letting like the mechanical part of your brain go crazy is just it is so cathartic. It is so fun.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I think there's. I think I walk past things like go to like a Lego store and see like the Millennium Falcon, which is like £750, like
Mhm.
800. I don't know whatever dollars, and I
Mhm.
think one day you'll be mine. Like one day one day I'll do this. I will do you one day, Millennium Falcon. One day.
It's gonna be a good day.
But not yet.
Trust
It's
me.
going to be a good. It's going to be a good
Yeah.
day. And I mean, lastly with your kind of your YouTube content too. Do you kind of see that as an avenue you're going to continue, kind of like, kind of because obviously we could talk about Star Wars all day here.
Sure.
I mean, I'm a huge into it anyway. But with like Andor and that kind of world, the
Mhm.
pop culture world in general is so kind of interesting to me. I
Sure.
think it's this it's so multifaceted as well. You can kind of kind of spend all your time doing sci-fi related stuff. You mentioned like Back to the Future. I mean, back to one, two, or three, Sean.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. One
Yeah,
for me. One, I had not seen. So the fun part for me is that again, I was not that I was sheltered as a kid, but like we just didn't have access to a lot, and so all the old movies that I watched were like from the 40s and 50s and 60s, and I didn't see a lot of like the heavy big hitters. So I didn't see Back to the Future until like 2 years ago, and because everybody's
what?
all this, I'm like, yeah, I know Back to the Future, I know what the story's about. I'd never seen it. Esports Awards, I was waiting to do something, and they had it on the TV, and I watched the whole thing. And I was like, wow, that was great. That was really good. I mean, that's just great. So yeah, like I'm getting to now revisit a lot of old movies that I never like watched and I didn't get to watch as a kid. So for me, just because I've only seen the first one, number one, of course. You kidding me? It's great. It's such a good movie.
I see. And you guys listening, watching might disagree here, but I think one definitely. I would say
Mhm.
two, absolutely brilliant as well. Three,
I heard
I'm
two was
fine.
really good. I heard
Two was
people
really
really
good
enjoyed two. Yeah,
because it was smart. I liked how smart it was.
that's
But I
what they
think
said.
the third
Yeah.
one's just like okay, it's fine. But
Okay, wait.
um,
So Indie one, two, or three? What are your thoughts?
I mean, Raiders for me is the perfect
It's
film
so
movie.
tough to beat Raiders, man.
It's just so
It
good.
really is.
I
I've grown
think
to
that
appreciate Doom way more. Like I never disliked it, but I've grown to appreciate it way more as I've gotten older. I think Crusade is like second. I think that they really nailed his
Crusade
dynamic
just
with Sean.
hits me in the feels
Yeah.
because like I think that kind of like the father son relationship is kind of like it's so good. And I think it's
Yeah.
because it's Sean Connery and Harrison Ford. You're just like this is perfect. But
Yep.
I think the third one is. I mean, what's really amazing, and this is on a personal note. My son's just joined like the Boy Scouts in the UK, and he's seen that kind of like the beginning of the third movie. I won't show many of the kind of violent bits and pieces, but just kind of the little bits like the train with the circus train and things. And because Indy's like the young Indy is a Boy Scout too, like my son kind of identifies, goes kind of like Indiana Jones is just like me,
Hmm.
and it
You're raising him
melts
right.
me. Oh
Yeah,
my god,
dude, you're
he's
raising him
just like
right.
me, Daddy. I'm like,
Andy,
you're damn right, he is.
yeah, it's Indy is. I think. I mean, it's one of those It's one of those trilogies that's going to be It's a classic already, but it's going to be timeless. Just like they just don't I say this all the time. They don't make them like that anymore, man.
They
Like,
don't,
the
man.
practicality Harrison Ford needs to be on the Mount Rushmore of male actors. Like, Harrison Ford just as an actor and
Oh
then
my god.
also having just the practicality of it all. Like, it just all of it holds up. It is so freaking cool all the time. Like, yeah, I wanna be a guy in a fedora with a whip just hunting
Yeah,
down relics. Yes, of course. Who doesn't?
and
Yeah.
I don't care that he's an arsehole in real life. Apparently, I mean,
No,
I'd
I
love
don't
to
give
meet the
it I
guy.
don't care. No, he's
I
great.
don't care because
Yeah.
he's amazing.
That's
I
how I
don't, yeah,
want
do you know
him.
what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my
Yeah.
god! Right, oh, you now to make some kind of video contextualize all these movies for us in some kind of YouTube content that I want to see very soon about Indiana
I
Jones.
did. I'll have to redo it. I did do a video on Raiders. It was more of just like talking about what is it about Indiana Jones that makes it like what it is and why it was so special as a kid. And it was fun to, it's not like the best video I've ever done, but it was really fun to do of just like what is it about Indy and like the world and the practicality of everything they did that was like really unique. And that, I mean, as a kid, that's what we latched onto. It was great. So, dude, oh god, those movies are just so good.
God, and there's only
There's so
three
much good
movies.
stuff from the 80s. There's just so good.
There are so many great things. The
Yeah.
80s was where I mean, and action movies don't get me started.
Yeah. Oh, it was just
Predator. I think Predator is
mhm.
one of the greatest movies out there. So
Oh, yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the
I
original?
mean, this
Yes.
God, there's so many great
Yeah.
movies. On that note, and this Raiders is available on your channel right now. I can watch this video.
Yeah, it's I think it's called like We Miss a Simpler Indiana Jones. It was right before the new movie came out.
Right.
It is not like this massive high quality thing. It's like what is it about indie that I remember that was really cool? And yeah, it was just fun. It was fun to do. It was like, wow, I miss so much of this world. Because Lego Indiana Jones as a kid on PlayStation 2, if you haven't played it, folks, was
Yeah.
amazing. It
The
was so
music.
fun.
Oh my god.
So fun. Yeah,
Oh my
so good.
god. Well, I need
Yeah,
to play that as well. I mean, just Lego games I could play for like until the end of time.
they're
they're
so
just,
good,
and
man.
there was a Back to the Future expansion with Lego Dimensions. I mean,
Oh, that's so
don't
good.
this could be a rabbit hole that we'd never get out of. We could just keep going. But that is definitely your indie videos on my wish list here.
Appreciate
Sean,
it.
thank you so much for being on Hop on Comms. It's been so great to have you, dude, and learn about your world and kind of like the incredible journey that you've been on thus far. Where can everyone find you online? Where are you socially?
I'm on the Twitters, not by choice. If you're on esports, you have to be on Twitter. So I'm there. You can find me on Twitter there at Spaceman SR. That's for all my socials. If you have any interest, same thing as the YouTubes. But most of my thoughts exist on Twitter, and that's the main one. So if I see you there, hello. Apologies for the tweets you'll see, but there you go.
The apology, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry for that. Sorry for anything
yeah.
that I say.
Sorry for all the Star Wars
Sean,
stuff you're
thank you
gonna
so
get
much
in
for
the
being.
next year.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we'll see you back on RLCS very soon. I have faith, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
The
great to
pint
be here,
glass is
man.
always
Thanks.
half full. We'll see you very soon. Thank you very much for joining me, Sean, and thanks for being here. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.